Alright, I am back with another Diablo 4 video ahead of what is supposed to be an announcement next week about when Season 1 is starting. That makes sense because that will be early July, and they said the season was coming mid to late July. I'm not sure if this is going to be like a full showcase kind of thing, or if they're just going to be like, this is the date of the season and do the showcase later. They will be revealing something about the season, the contents, how it works, the theme, what's being added. I don't think this is going to be like some big secret launch like we used to do with Destiny seasons. Instead, I wanted to talk about the patch that launched a couple of days ago. I just gotten back into town, so I've been able to play with it a little bit, and really kind of a stunning patch. I've not really seen much like it in the live service, looter, whatever space. It reminds me of Borderlands patches a little bit, which are generally 80% buffs, 20% nerfs. This is 99% buffs, along with some other boost to things, and it's really transformed at least part of the endgame in a pretty significant way. I would say the biggest aspect of this patch is the XP boosts, particularly the XP boosts that have come from Nightmare Dungeons. So they increased not just the XP that you get when you finish a dungeon, but also XP from killing monsters within a dungeon, like dramatically. I don't know the exact percentage, but it is easy to get, you know, from ranks 30 to 40, which is usually the ones I play at. On my two characters, like 1 to 2 million XP per run, when previously, you know, you can get you almost all the way to the full Paragon level, if not a full Paragon level, on your little meter there, when previously it would have taken, I don't know, at least 2 or 3 to get to that point. So it's a really massive increase for Nightmare Dungeons specifically. I haven't noticed it quite as much. They also increased like Hell Tides and individual completions of Tree of Whispers things, but I haven't really noticed that being a too significant boost. Maybe it's a little better, but you're not exactly, if you're going for XP, you're not exactly going to be farming those for XP. I think they're just not quite as useless for XP gain as they used to be, but again, in the end game, you're not really going around doing dedicated Tree of Whispers farms. They just sort of are incidentally completed as you're doing other things. They really are hurting you in Nightmare Dungeons, because not only is that, you know, the best source of XP, the only way you can level glyphs, it's also the place where they've confirmed that more ancestral and uniques drop over everywhere else in the game. So I think things might be a little too skewed toward Nightmare Dungeons at this point, but I'm certainly happy with the XP boost, and also one of the biggest quality of life changes the game has gotten so far, the ability to directly teleport to a Nightmare Dungeon instead of finding the closest waypoint, running all the way there, and then doing it like, you know, they used to be anywhere from 10 feet to like 2 miles apart from the spawn point. So this is a great change that I'm glad they've implemented so quickly. My theory here as to why they've boosted XP at this level is, well, it's a nice change, and people have said the endgame leveling process is a bit of a slog. It's not totally fixed, but it's certainly better after these changes. I mean, you're what, doubling or tripling XP for Nightmare Dungeons. I think this is mostly meant to encourage engagement with the seasonal model, because this accomplishes 2 things. This means that you can now get to a maxed endgame character quickly on the Eternal Realm, whether that's like, I don't know, 80, 85, where your build is probably mostly going to be done by then, outside of some extremely terrible luck. Or getting fully maxed to 100, where that is like the actual max with all your Paragon points, everything. You know, people were doing this before this, certainly. There was a hardcore race to 100, and then there's certainly a number of level 100 characters before this, but now it is much easier to get there. So if you finish an Eternal character, what does that motivate you to do? Do a seasonal character, either of a different class or restarting your own class with a different playstyle or whatever. And then also, the second thing this does is it serves to increase XP gain as you actually play the season. Like, it was already likely the case that there would be some amount of XP boosting during the course of a season, because this is not Diablo 3, where for some seasons it took like a couple hours to get to max level, which was much lower in Diablo 3, and then you'd start farming things. I don't think, you know, a ton of people are going to be necessarily playing all the way to level 100. I mean, certainly some people are, because especially with these XP boosts, but generally speaking, I think these boosts combined with other possible boosts within the season pass or whatever itself will combine to make leveling feel like a really speedy process, I think, for seasonal characters, which I know some people were worried about, myself included, about what it will be like to face regrinding of a character and also not being able to use the character that you've been using since the game launched a month ago. That is still an issue. You still can't use that character, at least in terms of progression seasonal stuff. The only thing we know for sure is that Eternal characters can start getting drops of new aspects and uniques from the season, so those will drop in the wild for Eternal characters, but everything else, the storyline, the battle pass, the bonuses, all of that stuff is through a seasonal character. So I think the main point of this XP boost was to encourage engagement with the seasons, and I certainly think it'll help with that. The rest of the patch was interesting. It was a large amount of buffs, although the scale of the buffs, I haven't really seen, the meta totally shift or something wild from these buffs, because a lot of them, they are buffing a lot of underused skills, but a lot of these things are like Frenzy, buff from 20 to 22% base damage. Like, is Frenzy underpowered? Yes. Are most primary skills underpowered? Yes. Is this making a Frenzy meta build based on a 2% base damage increase? It certainly is not. So you get a lot of these couple percent buffs for things, kick, cooldown reduced from 17 to 13 seconds, base damage for knockback to 54 to 70. Like, is there a kick meta now? No, but that's still a good change. So you're seeing this with a lot of various things. I think Sorcerer got the least, Sorcerer and Rogue got the least amount of benefits from this, and Druid and Barbarian probably benefited the most. But again, going down the list, like, it is some pretty minor buffs. I think they're not trying to go too nuts with a lot of this stuff. Like, at most, it's some pretty minimal base damage buffs. Iron Maiden on Necromancer, base damage increase from 10 to 20%. Sometimes you get a little higher. Bone Spikes, base damage increase from 80 to 120. And then they've done some things with different aspects and sometimes different weapons, and they're not major, but I think they're trying to just slowly slide other things into the meta as opposed to the craziest, biggest builds right now. But I am not seeing a ton of things emerge from this where it's like suddenly, oh man, this is totally viable when it was totally not viable before, or like this is the new best meta build. Like, that is one difference between this and Borderlands patches, where Borderlands patches are like often enormous buffs. Like, we're doubling the damage this gun's perk does. This is not really that. I think what's most notable here is the lack of buffs. It's not necessarily, the lack of nerfs. Not necessarily the buffs, given these relatively small but positive changes. It's the fact that, like, Bone Spear or what's the other one? Twisting Blades or Hammer of the Ancients or Ice Shards, or whatever the Druid one is that's really good. I don't know. Werewolves? Is that the good one? Pulverize? I've not played much Druid yet. Those were left off the chopping block. And Blizzard was criticized before for... It was like between early access and the actual launch of the game where they nerfed a ton of stuff. Some of it was, like, truly insane, like the Whirlwinds... I want to say exotic, unique, that just did way too much damage as you were starting and stopping Whirlwind for these huge explosions. They had to nerf stuff like that, but people were kind of mad they were doing nerfs that early. And now they said, oh, we're going to focus on buffs for a while. Here we are. I do not think this means necessarily that we're going to escape nerfs for some of these most powerful builds, especially when Season 1 rolls around. That is going to be the time where they kind of do the biggest passes on things, and I would be shocked if some of those high-end builds were not brought in line then. That is probably something they are testing to make sure they don't go too far, make sure things are still strong and people don't yell too much. And then, but also then we might be seeing some larger buffs as well, other than these pretty small increases that are not moving the needle that much for most of the skills in question here. if you know one of these skills or aspects or whatever that has been boosted to the point where like people should really be trying it now because it's awesome, please let me know in the comments. It's just a little hard to parse what exactly is a significant change and what isn't here based on just these number increases, because even if something is buffed, 40% damage increase, that doesn't necessarily mean it's one of the top tier choices now. But if something is significant and worth trying out here, I am all ears. So yeah, pretty impressed with this patch. The content of it, the XP boosts, even if that is in service of seasons, I think that's fine. I think anything to make seasons more appealing and less of a slog with re-leveling a character, I think is a good thing. And I have no complaints about getting to 100 a little faster on my Eternal characters. The grind slows down to an almost absurd degree, like post 70, post 80, like it is very, very slow, so anything that can help that is warranted. I am a little tired of just Nightmare Dungeons being like the quote most efficient thing to do of everything else, so hopefully the other endgame activities will continue to get at least some level of buffs in the future. I do wonder if World Tier 5 is coming with Season 1. I kind of doubt it. I don't know if they do a whole new World Tier that quickly, but certainly I believe that a higher World Tier is coming, before the end of next year. Certainly, like, once you have a reasonable build going, playing the open world content, playing Helltides, just become kind of a joke because nothing is ever more than, 2 or 3 levels above you outside of maybe world bosses. World bosses are also a joke. So the open world is in a weird place, and the only way to really challenge yourself right now is Nightmare Dungeons after a certain point, after your build is a certain level of strong. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the patch, a bit late here, but yeah, we'll see what next week brings in terms of announcements and dates and all that, but yeah, will be a lot to talk about then. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.